Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live webcast studio. We have been on a bit of a summer break, so we haven't seen you in a while, but we've been recharging our batteries for the season to come. Personally, I had a chance to see the Rammstein Stadium concert, the European tour. I was lucky enough to get a ticket, so if you have a chance to see this show, I warmly recommend it. The lighting is amazing. Among other things that's happened, if you were watching the intro to the webcast, you saw some imagery from the Blue Hour project. This is a multidisciplinary art installation project for the Prague Quadrennial. You can read more about this on our website. We will be posting a link down below here. It's also available under the Showcases section on the website. Among other news, we've also added a new reseller, or a reselling manufacturer as we call it, since this is not a reseller by the traditional standards. This is a manufacturer that allows you to purchase Capture along with some of their equipment. Infinity make the lighting console range the chimp, and if you're interested about this, you can read more about that on our website as well. Today I've prepared for you a Capture introduction special, so I'm going to take you through a made-up scenario where we try and design something with Capture. The goal is to show you how Capture works, a little bit of the concepts and philosophies behind Capture, but in a way that isn't pre-cooked as much as many of the other tutorials we have. This is more real life, so we will run into a few issues, a few common problems that you might see, and I'll try and show you how we deal with that and work around them. Now, I will be looking down here a little bit where I have my script, but where I can also see any questions you're posting. So if you have any questions, then post them below in the comments field. If they are related to the tutorial or special today, I will try and cover them as I go along. If they are more general, then I will probably save them towards the end of the webcast, where I could answer more general questions. So let's switch over to Capture, where I've started Capture 2019. I've got a blank project file. And the scenario we will be running is a very simple scenario in the sense that I don't have time to add a lot of lights here. But if I add one light, I'm sure you will see how you could add more lights. So it's more about the principles than, let's say, the volume of the design. The scenario is lighting a, now I lost the words, like a convention or a get-together of people where there is a speaker on stage talking about interesting things. And in this case, we are pretending that it's a science fiction convention. So we've been contacted by the organizers who need some assistance with the lighting and also some video projections. So we've been sent a drawing, or rather information about the stage where this will be happening. We've been given a few additional directions as well, but apart from that, our hands are quite free. So the first thing we need to think about is the location, the venue, and in this case it's a theater in New York, and we were sent a DWG file that is supposedly the drawing of the house. So the first thing I'm going to do is use the import model command in the file menu to take a look at this DWG from the New York Times Center. So let's open this and see what we find. So apparently there's a large seating area here. It does say stage here, so it's promising. At least there's a stage involved. So I'm going to simply grab the entire file contents and drop them into my blank project. I'll use the place at original position option since I don't want to add any level of confusion by moving things around. I'll close the import window and let's take a look at what I got here. Now, this may be slightly difficult to view over the live webcast, but there is a grid in the background of the view here in Capture. By default, on my computer, this grid is 1 by 1 meter. So it gives me a nice way of seeing whether the scale is anywhere close to what it should be. And in this case, the stage would be super tiny, so there is something wrong with the dimensions here. The way we deal with dimensions of imports in Capture is through something called the drawing unit. This is a property available down here in the properties of the selected objects. That defines the size or the scale of the imported objects. Now, since this is a New York/US stage, it's probably not drawn in millimeters, so my first guess would be 1 foot. So I enter that by typing 1 single quote mark. And the object goes huge, and I have to zoom out quite a bit here. Now this stage is probably not 0.5 kilometers wide, so obviously this was the wrong guess. Because I can hardly see the grid here anymore, I have to zoom so far out. So let's try the other common option, which is probably 1 inch. So I will type 1 and double quote. Now it's scaled back to something far more reasonable. The stage now has about 5 grid cells, which would be 5 meters deep. Now if I zoom in a bit here, it does actually say that the stage is 66 feet by 15 feet deep. So 15 feet is around 5 meters, so I think I have the scale right now. The inch guess was the right one. So we do have some info here. It does say 20 feet 11 inches to ceiling, 20 feet 3 inches to the grid. So I guess we can assume we have around 20 feet to play with for the height of the lighting instruments. Now another interesting thing here is if I look at the section view here on the top right corner, it's pretty empty. And that will be because we've actually received a plan drawing with a couple of 3D elements. So this is not an uncommon scenario that the DWG file is actually not 3-dimensional as much as 2-dimensional. Now in this case, it seems they have actually drawn the projection surface, so probably they have a built-in curtain they can take down, or a fixed one, what do I know. And they have drawn that in 3D, which is quite helpful. Just then we can use this to test the projection distance for the projector. Another issue, I would say, is that we have the stage on the left-hand side of the drawing. I'm not a great fan of that. Usually we draw things in Capture with the stage on the upper side of a top view, so I will rotate it all around. And I will also drop some of the elements on the drawing here because it's a little bit too cluttered for my needs. I've been asked here if the tutorials will be available in French. I do not think so at this point. However, I will point out that you can have the auto-generated subtitles on YouTube, and they are actually very good. The mistakes it makes are very few, and I believe you can have it in most languages actually. But you do need to actively go in and turn it on. It will not appear by default, I believe. So back to the drawing here. I will start with selecting the imported objects here, although I will do it in the section view because I only want to select the stage here minus the smoke object. And then in the top view, I will use the rotation triangle to rotate everything by 90 degrees. So we have the stage upwards, as I said. I will also move it all so that we have downstage center, at least roughly where origo is, because that's how I, and I suppose most people, prefer it. Now the textual information that we see in the drawing here is all green. We have some red elements and other colors, and the reason for this is that the objects came in a number of different layers, and these layers have different colors. So if I want to remove the textual information here, what I want to do is hide a number of layers. The way we do that is by using filters, which allows us to check and uncheck the layers we want to see. So I'll create a new filter here. Let's call it clean. And now I can check and uncheck layers. However, I do need to apply the filter to one or more views. There is a shortcut here on the More button to apply it to all views. So I will go for that. And you can see the text disappeared in the top view here. So I will hide some other stuff here just to clean things up a bit. Yes, I like that. Now we have, did I hide the stage though? Let's not hide the stage, that's unnecessary. Yeah, so now we have something that is a little bit cleaner. Yes, we can provide the DWG file. Actually, I found it from an American website that had DWG files of a large number of theaters available online. So that is good to keep in your mind, that if you're doing a design for a particular location, chances are you can actually find the drawings online somewhere. If not on the location's own website, then maybe in an archive that keeps DWGs of different locations. I was also asked how I snapped the rotation to 90 degrees so quickly, and that I did by holding down the Shift key, which steps the rotation tools in steps of 5 degrees. You can actually configure those degrees in the options as well. This is the rotation snap angle and is activated by holding the Shift key. So I think it's time to add a little bit of lighting. Or actually, let's put something on stage first to get a better sense of the perspective. So I will go to the library and start with a person, an actor. All right, yeah, this looks reasonable. Now, if he's going to be talking, he might be standing in front of a lectern. So let's add one of those as well, to make it look at least a little bit more interesting. So yeah, the scale looks right. I said we had about 20 feet of clearance. So a nice trick here is to use the grid settings of a view. So in this case, my section view is down to the left in the gamma view. Now if I change the grid height to 20 feet, yeah, which might be tricky to see, but the first grid line actually appears right here, which is right just slightly below the projection surface. So if you remember, we had ceiling at 21 feet and grid height at 20 feet. So this does make sense. So we will be rigging at a height of around 19-20 feet. Let's grab a couple of source 4s from the library. Let's type the full name, source 4. I have no idea, to be honest. I'll just go for a couple of 19 degrees. Now, when you add fixtures in a new project in Capture, by default, they end up at floor height. Now, we do have a missing coordinates button that allows you to set the desired height. So let's go for 19 feet. Apply and remember. And then when you add the next fixture, that ends up at the 19 feet as well, as we can see in the section view here as well. So let's move it out a bit outside the audience and see if we can focus them on the speaker. I'm going to switch the view here into live mode. And everything goes dark because we haven't turned any lights on yet. So a nice trick here is to use the ambient lighting setting of that gamma view to have some working lights before we get going and we have some things lit so we can see what we're doing. So here we have the two source force and we have the speaker. If I hit the power like button here, I get the control pane that allows me to turn the fixtures on. I'll close that pane again, and then I'll go into the focusing mode and click on the speaker. Now this does look awfully bright. Capture does try to adapt the brightness of the view constantly based on the lighting conditions. It can be tricky from time to time. This is controlled using the exposure settings under the view category here. And there is an adjustment parameter available as well. And there are many situations where you may find it useful to actually lock the exposure level to a constant so that it doesn't keep changing as you are dimming fixtures in and out. So we have a couple of fixtures here. Let's also take a look at how to put gels in them, since this is a common capture question. And the way we put filters or gels in fixtures is by drag and drop from the library. So let's assume we want a filter. Let's have a Roscoe Amber. So the search function here is very useful, but keep in mind you do not have to enter the full name of things. So I want a Roscoe Amber. It's quite enough to write Rosc Amb, the beginnings of the words, which immediately takes me to the amber filters of Roscoe. And you simply drag and drop the filters you want into the fixtures. So let's put something lavender on the right hand side. That's a weird one. Lavender tint. So it's very easy and fast to apply filters, but you have to find that you do it by drag and drop from the library. Capture is quite drag and drop oriented, and often if you're looking for something, the answer may well be to use drag and drop. So at this point, this looks nice, but we have the fixtures hanging in midair. Let's take a look at adding some truss. Trussing is available down here in the library as well. I don't know what kind of equipment the customer might have access to here or might be available at the venue. So I'm simply going to go for a generic piece of rectangular truss. Now, one of the benefits of using the generic truss and some other generic items in the library is that they are more editable than the non-generic items. So if I had taken a ProLight piece of truss, then I could not edit it. But because this is a generic truss piece, then I can go in here and say, I guess we'll need around 10 meters. I have no idea which specific piece is, but at this point, that does the trick for me. So we have the truss here now, just below the 20 feet. So let's snap the fixtures to the truss, like this in the top view. Let's see if we need adjusting the focusing. No, that looks decent for now. So we have some basics set up. I also mentioned we wanted to do some video projection, so let's throw the projector in right away. Now, to simplify things, let's pretend I already know that we want to use a Christie 4K30 projector for all their nice space images. So I'll simply drag that in and put it on the truss. Now we can instantly see a test pattern coming out from the projector. So this is standard in Capture unless you've hooked up some other video or media source. Now we have a couple of options here when it comes to focusing the video projector. I could use the focusing tool that I used before, but this can end up in creating some angles. So I'm going to show you the other way, which is using the rotation anchor to focus the projector. Now, as you can see, at this distance from the projector screen, we're not really using it very well. It seems we're using a fixed lens here, so I have no zoom capabilities. And also the lighting is coming in pretty steep, so I think it's fair to say that we could easily move things out a little bit here. Let's adjust the focus of the projector. Now, because we're coming in at an angle, we have some distortion of the projected image. We can adjust that by using the vertical keystone setting in the control pane here. So let's do that. That looks much better. And finally, we want to throw an image into the projector. And as I mentioned, we had been given one. So in order to do this, we need to hook up the projector with a media source. The idea here is that you can have one media source feeding multiple fixtures. This is the reason you set up the media source in separate from the actual fixture. The way we do that is by using the video players. Now, this has a resolution option, and this is actually for the internal video resolution simulated in the visualization. So I'm going to choose a 16:9 ratio Full HD for the visualization and add that image that I had gotten. And finally, hook this up with the video projector, which we do under selected items in the design tab by specifying the media, which is going to be the video player I just created. As I do this, the test card goes away. It goes black, and the reason is I also need to hit play in the video player. So now it says United Federation of Planets here, so we are obviously dealing with Star Trek. Sorry, had to do that. The lights have gone out of focus because we moved the truss, so let's quickly readjust them. Now, if you grow tired of using the focus tool, it's good to know that you can right-click for a speed focus. Simply right-click where you want to focus the fixtures, and they're there in an instant. So, we're starting to get somewhere. This is a point where I might want to send an image to the client to see what they think, check if we're going anywhere in the right direction. But I would like to impress them a little bit with my mad capture skills. And this actor here, frankly, looks a bit boring. So I went on the internet to see if I could find something more interesting. I went to the 3D warehouse. It's formerly the SketchUp warehouse or SketchUp 3D warehouse. It has lots of models available for free that you can download as SketchUp files and import into Capture. Now, since this is a Star Trek event, I could not resist the temptation of finding a Star Wars figure, because that's always fun. So I'm going to import from the SketchUp file I downloaded from the 3D warehouse online. It is quite detailed actually, so it does take a little bit of time to open the file. There are some issues with it, but it's mostly for fun at this point, so I'm not going to take a very detailed look. Apparently I did get something here, so if we switch to the custom mode in, oops, you can't see that. So if I switch to the custom mode here, I get something more of a solid view of the objects. So this thing here looks like 3CPO, which suits me perfectly. So I will grab our Star Wars robot and drop him in. Now something happened which is quite common. I dragged 3CPO, the robot, in here, but I can't actually see him. Why is that? Well, the reason is we had applied a filter before, hiding some layers, and FreeCPO came in a layer that is not visible now. So when you are importing objects, keep in mind that if there's something you don't see, you might need to go and check on your filters. Now in this case, our metal guy lives in layer 0, so by turning that on, we can now see him. So let's move him down to stage level, or floor, and get rid of the boring guy. Delete, or exterminate. So this is interesting. We can actually select individual pieces of our robot here. So he hasn't come in as a homogeneous lump, but rather in pieces. This can get a little bit impractical. So I'm going to group the whole guy so that I can click anywhere on him and get the whole robot rather than just a piece of him. And then let's move him up to the lectern. Yeah, so this looks better, but it's still a bit wrong. He's supposed to be made out of shiny metal, but unfortunately the materials in SketchUp are a bit limited. But we can make up for that in Capture. So if we go to the materials here, it seems we have 4 materials, a completely gray one that is also just gray. Then we have 2 with textures that contain something golden looking, so that's promising. Let's select both those materials together and crank up the smoothness a bit, as well as the metallic setting. Yes, now we're getting somewhere. This looks much more correct. We're even getting some insane brightness fireflies here. So maybe I have overdone it a little bit with some of the settings. Let's take them down a little bit. Now, finally, before I send off my design suggestion, I want to add something more to the setting. Now, it might be tempting to throw in some backlighting, but frankly, we don't have a lot of headroom here, and we don't want to get in the way of the projections either. So let's put something on the floor. So for the simplicity, let's assume that we can use some of the new T1 fixtures from Roby, the T1 profiles. I'll drag one of those into the design. It ends up at the 19 feet or so that we had configured before, high up in the air. Now, in order to bring them down to the floor, I need to move them down as well as rotate them. Now, for the rotation, again, I will use the rotation anchor, holding Shift so that it snaps nicely to the 180 degrees, and then simply move it down to the floor. If we wanted to pay attention to the direction of the LED panel, or it's not even an LED panel anymore, the panel or the pigtail or power cord, then we would zoom in on the fixture where we can see the power cord location as well as the display location. As an option, you can also switch to the plot mode where the power symbol shows you the power cord location of the fixture. But I'm just playing around now, so I'm not going to do any fine adjustments on that level. I will simply use the quick copy button to just very fast add a few more fixtures around the stage. Now I want to select them all together and do something interesting with them. I could click on them one by one, but I can also use the Select All by Fixture type shortcut that finds all fixtures of the same type. Now, if you remember, we bring up the control pane. Now I can use the home button to quickly have them homed. And now, as you can see, we have a lot more options available than for the source force. So we have color mix here, we have hue, saturation, and intensity. We can also put in, say, a breakup pattern and do some pan and tilt adjustments. So let's do a simple aerial effect. I just want to add a little bit of dynamic to the scene to make it more interesting. Now at this point, it's a little bit unrealistic that we would have this amount of smoke on an event like this. You can see the beams very clearly in the view. It doesn't quite make sense. So where's the smoke? Well, Capture automatically adds smoke to your designs. It does so by something called smoke boxes, which are indicated by a little smoke cloud symbol. It's this little guy here. If you click on that, you get access to, under selected items, the properties of the smoke, which includes the density. So that is basically the amount of smoke. Now I'm just going to give it a little bit down here so that we can see a little bit of it in the air, but nothing more. And then at this point, I think maybe we could send an image to the customer, but I want to take it a little bit further and see if we can do something more interesting, some sort of movement. Now, I could hook up to a lighting console and do pan and tilt effects. I don't quite have time for that, so I'm going to cheap out and throw in a video on the backdrop. Now again, the internet is your friend. I went online. I won't do it live here because internet connection and stuff. But if you go online and search for stars video MP4, you will instantly find something useful, as I did. So I have a short video clip of a nebula here that I can play instead. Now, if you remember, we left the ambient lighting setting on for the view to see what we were doing, and that is kind of ruining the video projection now. So let's take that down. Let's crank up the exposure a little bit. So now we have a slowly moving nebula in the background. Now what I can do, for instance, is I can save an image, which is right behind my neck here. But it's called save image, obviously. Idea 1. You can specify the file size here, but I'll just use the default options. Hit save, and voila, we have our picture here that we can send to the client. And if I want to take it that one step further, I can record a movie snapshot. Remember, I put the playing video file on here in the background. So I could record a movie. Let's choose the higher frame rate for the video's sake. Record a couple of seconds at least. Now this gives us an option to render a movie file as opposed to the image I saved before. So let's call this idea 2. Now, in order not to bore you, I'm going to render this at lower resolution. And there we go. This gives me an MP4 file, a video file, that I could put on YouTube or send to the client with some motion inside. It could have all your pan and tilt effects, video, laser, moving scenery, moving cameras. And one of the benefits of rendering a movie, as opposed to trying to use the screen capture software as some do, is that when you render a movie, you will get a higher quality movie than if you use a screen capture software. So it is in your favor to use the movie snapshots and render movies. Now, I did receive a question from Nick here, whether we will be making more people or more realistic people in the library in the future. And I would say at the moment it's actually not very likely. We are seeing so many quite realistic models of people popping up on various sources like the 3D warehouse I mentioned, but also on other 3D sites, that it is so easy to obtain an actor that suits your design, your project, and something that appeals to you and your customer, rather than us making yet one more guy that doesn't suit anyone. And I would say in general, there is so much 3D content available on the internet now that you can find almost anything there. And it's not even that complicated anymore. You simply type what you need in Google and put SketchUp file or 3D file after it, and you're going to find something in no time. So where were we? How much time do we have? So the final thing I wanted to show you was a little bit about paperwork, but I think we are kind of running short here, and I would need another 15 minutes. So I'm going to take a look at the questions we have. So if you have any questions, please write them in the comments field. We have a comment from Thomas mentioning higher risks of crashes with the last update. So in general, if you see any crashes, it's super important that you send us crash reports so that we can take a look at them. It is not the least bit uncommon that crashes that happen on one computer are absolutely impossible to get to happen on another computer. So the crash reports are really important tools for us to get to fix everything. Now, in this case, if it is related to the reports, this could actually have more to do with Internet Explorer that we use internally to show the reports. But again, send us the crash report and we'll take a look at it. Carson is asking, he's a student who likes stage lighting a lot, and he likes to use Capture Polar on his PC. Capture Polar is an older version of Capture. And he's asking how to get movement into the lights after he's patched them in Capture. Now, the control pane in Capture allows you to do many things, framing, shadow cuts, etc., but they are all static. So you cannot actually program any beam movements in Capture as such. You do need to use a lighting console. The good thing, though, is that most lighting consoles have an offline editor available that you can use for free. So you can actually use a real lighting console to program the lights in Capture. And that is the best way to get your dynamic looks in Capture. Now, obviously, if you are doing it for an actual show, then the benefit is that you've already done part of the lighting console programming, so you don't need to redo that on site because you're doing it with Capture. Another question is how to make the gobos rotate. So this is actually not possible at this point. It's something we are working on for the next release. There are a number of things in the control pane here, like rotating gobos, animation wheels, for instance, and a few more specific things like random shutter strobes, for instance, that are not available yet, but we're working on adding these. Luis is asking about VR export of images, things like 360 images, 360 videos, and so on. It's not a feature we have at the moment, but it is kind of highly requested, so it's not improbable that it's something that is going to appear in the future. John is asking, rather than seeing you all work on the software rather than generic models, will the truss models be improved so hang points are more accurate? I think, to be honest, at this point, we are not looking at bringing in more accurate truss models. It is more likely than that we would make it possible for you to import drawings of truss models and have Capture understand that they are trusses. I think that is the best thing really if you want to verify your hang points to that level of detail. It would simply take us too much resources to do that at this point. Luis is asking about probably bidirectional connectivity with the Onyx console. This is something at this point that is actually fully in the hands of the Onyx/Obsidian guys. They say they're working on it, so we have to wait patiently for them to have this done in a future software release. I'm afraid I don't have any ideas about the release date there, so it's better to ask the Onyx guys about this actually. Luis is asking about paperwork and whether it's possible to have different point of views in the paperwork. So in the plot view in Capture, we have a number of view types built in, I suppose. It's the top view. We have the front section views. So front view, I'll use the keyboard for the next one, which is the section view. And of course, there is also a 3D option available, which you invoke simply by rotating the camera. Now, when you are editing the plot as such, in the plot editor, you start with a blank piece of paper, you insert a view, and this by default is a top view. So if I had gone on with the paperwork things here, I would have shown you, for instance, I would have reused the filter I created to reduce the clutter on here. And I might also have used the type option here, which allows me to choose different types of views in the plot. So yes, you can have the top, front, and section views in the plot as well. That is perfectly possible. And finally, possibly, is it possible to have those moving heads move all around the showroom? I'm afraid I don't quite follow the question, to be honest. In terms of focusing, you can use the pan and tilt sliders here. In complement to that, as I mentioned, you can right-click to quick focus a fixture on any object. And you can go into the focus mode, which is the dedicated focusing mode that only allows you to select and focus fixtures. So those are the best options. I've seen many users build like an empty room simply to have places to click to quickly focus fixtures on the far end of the room, for instance, since that is more handy than using the pan and tilt sliders. So I think I'm going to make it a day there. Thank you for watching, and I look much forward to seeing you soon again. I don't have the topic ready for the next webcast yet, so we will be announcing that around a week before the webcast as usual. Thanks guys, and see you soon again.